The diplomatic meeting was supposed to be simple. Captain Lee So-min checked her watch as she walked through the metal corridors of Kepler 7 station. Her team followed behind her, 3 good soldiers who trusted her completely. The station felt cold and empty, with too many shadows in the corners. "Something feels wrong," whispered Sergeant Park Jae-ho, her weapons specialist. His hand stayed close to his gun, even though this was supposed to be a peaceful meeting. So-min nodded. She had the same feeling. 20 years in the Terran defense. Corps had taught her to trust her gut. The Vorthan Empire had requested this meeting to discuss trade agreements, but everything felt off. The station was too quiet. Where were all the workers? They reached meeting room 7. So-min touched the door controls and it slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was dark except for a single light over a metal table. No one was waiting for them. "Captain," said Corporal Lee Ora, her communications expert, "I'm not getting any signals from the station's main computer. It's like everything just went dead?" Before So-min could respond, the lights went out completely. Emergency red lights flickered on, casting everything in an evil glow. Then she heard it, a sound like glass breaking, but musical. It was the sound of Vorthan energy weapons charging up. "Ambush!" So-min shouted, pulling out her weapon. "Take cover." Blue energy bolts filled the air around them. The Vorthans had been hiding in the walls somehow, using their technology to stay invisible. So-min rolled behind an overturned table and started shooting back. Her team did the same, but they were outnumbered badly. The Vorthans looked like tall, thin people made of pale blue crystal. They moved with grace like dancers, but their weapons were deadly. Each energy bolt could cut through metal like it was paper. "There are too many of them," Park Jae-ho called out. He was bleeding from his arm, but still fighting. So-min saw more Vorthans coming through the walls. Literally through the walls. Their technology let them phase through solid matter for short times. They were surrounding her team completely. She watched in horror as a Vorthan appeared behind Corporal Lee Bo-ra. The young woman tried to turn, but the energy bolt hit her in the chest. She fell without making a sound. Park Jae-ho stood up to help her, but 3 energy bolts hit him at once. He collapsed next to his friend. Private Kim Min-ho, barely 19 years old, was the last one besides So-min. He looked at her with frightened eyes. "Captain, what do?" "We do?" Before she could answer, a Vorthan commander stepped through the wall behind Min-ho. This one was taller than the others, with golden markings on his crystal skin. He moved his hand, and Min-ho simply stopped moving. "Some kind of paralysis weapon." "Captain Lee So-min of the Terran Defense Corps," the commander said. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "I am Commander Thexvol of the Vorthan Empire. You will surrender now." So-min kept her weapon pointed at him. Why? This was supposed to be a peaceful meeting. Thexvol made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peace? With humans? Your species is nothing but violent animals from a harsh world. You solve everything with force and brutality. We have studied you. If you've studied us, then you know we don't give up easily." "Yes," Thexvol said. "That is exactly why you must be eliminated. Your people are a threat to civilized species everywhere. But first, you will tell us the location of your hidden military bases." More Vorthans appeared around the room. So-min counted at least 20 of them, all with weapons aimed at her. Her own weapon could maybe kill 2 or 3 before they got her, but she had to try something. She thought about her crew. Good people, all of them. Park Jae-ho had a wife and 2 kids on Earth. Lee Bo-ra was saving money to start her own business. Kim Min-ho had just gotten engaged. Now they were all dead because she had walked into a trap. "You want to know about human military bases?" So-min said, slowly standing up. "Here's what I know about them." She pulled out a small device, a data scrambler that would destroy all the information in her suit's computer. If they tortured her for information, at least they wouldn't get it from her equipment. Thexvol moved faster than she expected. Some kind of energy field wrapped around her like invisible ropes. She couldn't move her arms or legs. The data scrambler fell from her hand and clattered on the floor. "Foolish?" Thexvol said. Did you think we would let you destroy evidence? We have technology you cannot imagine. The energy field lifted So-Min off the ground. She floated in the air, unable to move anything except her eyes. Vexville walked closer, his crystal face reflecting the red emergency lights. Your species evolved on a high-gravity world, he said. You are used to heavy conditions, but we have something special prepared for you, something that will break even a human. They carried her through the station like she was a piece of luggage, so Min tried to memorize everything she saw. The Vorthans had taken over the entire station. Human workers and alien traders were frozen in place, caught by the same paralysis weapons. Some looked dead. The Vorthan ship was connected to the station by a tube made of the same blue crystal material as their bodies. Inside the ship, everything was elegant and delicate. The walls curved like the inside of a seashell. Soft lights moved through the crystal like living things. Beautiful, is it not? Vexville said, noticing her looking around. The ship was grown, not built. It took 50 years to create each crystal panel. Your human ships are just metal boxes, by comparison. So Min wanted to tell him that human ships were built to last and fight, not to look pretty. But the energy field still kept her from speaking. They moved through corridor after corridor. So Min saw other Vorthans working at stations that looked like art more than technology. Everything was smooth and flowing. Nothing had sharp edges or hard corners. It was the opposite of human engineering. Finally, they reached a room with a single metal chamber in the center. It looked completely different from everything else on the ship, hard, angular, and ugly. This, Vexville said with pride, is our gravity cell. No species has ever escaped from it. The gravity inside can be increased to 50 times what you experienced on your home world. Even humans cannot survive that for long. He gestured, and other Vorthans opened the chamber. Inside was just an empty metal box, about 3 meters on each side. There were strange devices in each corner that hummed with power. You will stay here until you decide to cooperate, Vexville continued. The gravity will start at 10 times. Earth normal. If you do not tell us what we want to know, we will increase it, slowly. The energy field moved So-Min toward the open chamber. She could feel her heart beating fast, but she tried not to show fear. These aliens expected her to break immediately. They thought humans were just strong animals with no real intelligence. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The chamber. Door closed behind her with a solid clang. So-Min found herself alone in the metal box, still unable to move. Then she heard Vexville's voice coming from speakers in the walls. Enjoy your new home, human. When you are ready to talk, just call out. We will be listening. The humming from the corner devices grew louder. So-Min felt her body becoming heavier as the artificial gravity began to increase. The energy field. Holding her disappeared, and she dropped to the floor hard. The real test was about to begin. The weight hit So-Min like a giant hand pressing down on her entire body. 10 times Earth gravity meant that her normal 70 kilograms now felt like 700. Every breath was a struggle. Her arms felt like they were made of lead, but she was still conscious. Still thinking. Through the speakers, she heard Vexville talking to his crew in their musical language. Then his voice came through clearly in human standard language. Fascinating, he said. Most species would be unconscious by now. Humans truly are adapted to harsh conditions. So-Min tried to speak, but the words came out as a whisper. The gravity was pressing down on her lungs, making it hard to get enough air to talk loudly. Do you want? She managed to say. Simple information, Vexville replied. The locations of your hidden military bases, the numbers of your fleet, the weaknesses in your defenses. Once you tell us these things, we can end your suffering. So-Min pressed her palms against the metal floor and tried to push herself up. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she managed to get to her hands and knees. Years of training in high-gravity environments on Luna Base had prepared her for this. Though 10 times Earth normal was still brutal. Never, she said, slightly louder now that she could breathe a little better. There was silence for a moment. Then Nextville spoke again, and she could hear surprise in his voice. "You can still move? Remarkable. But this is only the beginning. Let me show you something." The gravity suddenly jumped to 15 times normal. Somin collapsed flat against the floor again. The metal pressed against her face was cold and unforgiving. Her heart pounded as it struggled to pump blood through her body against the massive force. "This cell has been tested on members of every known species," Dixwell continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "The Zalani passed out at 3 times their world's gravity. The mighty Korax warriors lasted until 5 times. Even the hegemony cybernetic soldiers failed at 8 times their normal gravity." Somin focused on breathing in and out, slow and steady. She had learned this technique during her training on Titan, where the gravity was much lower than Earth, but the atmosphere was poisonous. The instructors had put them in pressure suits and gradually increased the weight. Until some cadets passed out, she had never passed out. "But you humans," Dexvo went on, "you evolved on a world with gravity that would crush most civilized beings. Your bones are dense, your muscles are thick. Your hearts are powerful pumps, you are built like living weapons." The gravity dropped back to 10 times normal. Somin felt like she was floating, even though she was still pressed against the floor. She managed to turn her head to look around the chamber. It was a simple metal box, just like it had appeared from outside. The walls were smooth except for ventilation grates near the ceiling. In each corner was a device about the size of her fist. They were perfectly round and made of the same blue crystal material as the ship. They hummed with energy and glowed with soft light. "Those are gravity emitters," Dexville said, apparently watching her through hidden cameras. "They create localized gravitational fields that can be precisely controlled. The technology took us centuries to perfect." Somin studied the devices more carefully. They were positioned exactly in each corner, about 2 meters up from the floor. The humming sound had a rhythm to it, almost like a heartbeat. As she watched, the light in each emitter pulsed in perfect synchronization. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because it does not matter what you know," Dexvo replied. "This cell has never been escaped. The gravity emitters are controlled by our ship's main computer. Even if you somehow managed to damage one, the others would compensate. And how could you possibly reach them while crushed by gravity?" Somin tried to push herself up again. This time she managed to get to a sitting position, though her back was bent over and her head hung down. The effort left her breathing hard. "Impossible," she heard one of the other Vorthans say in their language. Her suit's translation system was still working, apparently. "No," Dexville said. "Not impossible. Just proof of how dangerous this species is. Look at her. Any civilized being would have surrendered by now, begging for mercy. But she sits there like some primitive beast, defying forces that should have killed her." The gravity increased again, this time to 20 times normal. Somin's vision went dark around the edges as blood struggled to reach her brain. She fell forward onto her hands, gasping for air. "This is what your people do not understand." Lexvola's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You think strength makes you superior? But strength without wisdom is just brutality. We Vorthans learned long ago that intelligence and technology are far more powerful than physical force." Somin closed her eyes and focused on staying conscious. Her training had taught her that the mind could endure almost anything if it had a purpose. Her purpose was simple: survive long enough to find a way out of this cell and kill Dexville. The gravity dropped to 15 times normal again. Somin realized they were playing with her like a cat playing with a mouse. They wanted to break her spirit before they broke her body. "Your ship was destroyed, by the way," Dexville said casually. "The TDF Bazen put up a good fight, but our weapons are far superior. Your Captain Kim Woo-jin managed to get off a distress signal before the end, but it will take days for any human ships to reach this sector." Somin felt anger burning in her chest. The Bazen was her backup ship. Woo-jin was a good captain and a friend. If Dexville was telling the truth, then dozens more good people were dead, but something in his voice made her think he was lying. The way he said it was too casual, too perfect. He was trying to break her morale by making her think she was completely alone. "I don't believe you," she said through gritted teeth. "Believe what you wish," Dexville replied. "It changes nothing. You are alone, Captain. Your crew is dead, your ship is destroyed, your fleet is days away. All you have left is pain." The gravity went up to 25 times normal. Somin's arms gave out and she fell flat on her face. Again, the taste of blood filled her mouth as the impact split her lip. Everything hurt. Her bones felt like they were bending under the pressure, but her mind was still working. Even through the pain and the struggle to breathe, she was thinking about the gravity emitters, about their positioning, about the way they pulsed imperfect. Synchronization. About the slight delay she had noticed when the gravity changed. "Perhaps you need time to consider your situation," Dexville said. "I will leave you alone for a while to think. When I return, we can discuss how much pain you are willing to endure for the sake of your pride." The speaker went silent. Somin was alone in the metal box with only the humming of the gravity emitters for company. The weight pressing down on her was enormous. But she had noticed something important. When Dexville changed the gravity settings, there was always a moment of delay before the new level took effect. Maybe half a second, maybe less. But it was there. And in that brief moment, the emitters had to recalibr8. Somin smiled. Despite the blood on her lips and the crushing weight on her body, these aliens thought they understood humans. They thought they knew how humans worked. They were about to learn that humans were very good at turning their enemies' weapons against them. The real test was just beginning. Somin lay on the cold metal floor, feeling every gram of the crushing weight pressing down on her body. 25 times Earth gravity was more than she had ever experienced, even in the most extreme training scenarios. But her mind was working. Analyzing, calculating. She had always been good with physics. Growing up on Luna Colony, where gravity was weak and artificial, she had learned early that understanding how forces worked could mean the difference between life and death. One mistake with a gravity generator or an airlock and you were dead. In the vacuum of space. The gravity emitters hummed above her in their perfect rhythm. She forced herself to listen carefully to the sound. Each emitter had exactly the same frequency, but there was something else. A very slight echo effect, like sound bouncing around in an empty room. That meant the gravitational fields were interacting with each other. Min thought back to her engineering classes at the academy. Professor Hundong Su had been obsessed with gravitational physics. He used to say that artificial gravity was like trying to juggle 4 balls while riding a bicycle. Possible, but only if you understood exactly how all the forces balanced against each other. "Artificial gravity systems work by creating focused gravitational wells," she whispered to herself, remembering his lectures. "But gravity is not a simple force. It warps space-time itself. When you have multiple sources, they interfere with each other." She tried to move her arm, just a few centimeters. The effort was enormous, but she managed to slide her hand across the floor. As she moved, she felt a tiny change in the gravitational pressure. It was so small that most people would never notice it, but her engineer's brain caught it immediately. The gravity field was not perfectly uniform throughout the cell. This made sense. 4 emitters in the corners meant 4 separate gravitational sources. The fields overlapped in the center of the chamber, but near the edges, one emitter would be stronger than the others. And where the fields met, there would be interference patterns. So Min began a slow, painful movement toward one corner of the cell. Every centimeter was a struggle. Her muscles burned and her lungs ached, but she kept going. She had to understand how this system worked. As she got closer to the corner with the first emitter, she felt the gravity shift slightly. It was still crushing, but the direction of the force changed just a little bit. Instead of pressing straight down, it was pulling slightly toward the corner. "Inverse square law," she muttered. The closer she got to a gravity source, the stronger its effect compared to the others. The 4 emitters were not perfectly balanced. They could not be, because that was physically impossible. She spent what felt like hours moving around the edges of the cell, mapping how the gravity changed in different positions. It was exhausting work. Several times she had to stop and rest, lying flat while her heart pounded and her vision went dark. But slowly, a picture formed in her mind. The four emitters created overlapping fields that were strongest in the center of the chamber. But the fields were not static. They were constantly adjusting to maintain the programmed gravity level. When she moved, sensors detected her position and the emitters compensated to keep the total force constant. That was the key insight. The system was reactive, not passive. So-Min forced herself to crawl to the exact center of the chamber. Here, the four gravitational fields balanced against each other perfectly. She could feel the precise point where all the forces met. Then she did something that would have seemed crazy to anyone watching. She started to rock back and forth, just a tiny movement at first. A few centimeters one way, then back to center, then a few centimeters the other way. Each motion required enormous effort under 25 times gravity, but she persisted, and she felt it, the system responding to her movement. When she moved toward one corner, that emitter reduced its output slightly while the others increased theirs. When she moved back to center, they all readjusted again. The changes were automatic and nearly instantaneous, but they existed. Feedback loop, she whispered. The gravity cell worked by constantly monitoring her position and adjusting the four emitters to maintain uniform pressure. But like any feedback system, it had limits. If she could move fast enough or in the right pattern, she might be able to confuse the sensors. So-Min thought about resonance frequencies. Every system had a natural frequency at which it vibrated. Push it at exactly the right rhythm, and even a small force could build up to enormous effects. Professor Han had shown them a video of an old bridge on Earth that had collapsed because wind hit it at just the right frequency. Could she find the resonance frequency of the gravity cell? She began to experiment with different movement patterns. Short, quick movements, long, slow ones, circular motions, figure-8 patterns. Each time she felt for how the system responded. The work was brutal. Under normal gravity, these movements would have been simple exercises. Under 25 times normal, each motion was like lifting a truck. Sweat poured from her body and her muscles screamed in pain. But she was learning. The system had a slight delay when she changed direction quickly. Not much, maybe a tenth of a second, but it was there. And when she moved in a circular pattern, the emitters had to work harder to compensate because her position was constantly changing. Most importantly, she discovered that the system was designed to handle one target moving predictably. It assumed she would try to escape by moving toward an exit or try to damage the emitters by moving toward them. It was not designed for someone who moved in complex, seemingly random patterns. After what felt like hours of experimentation, So-Min found something interesting. When she moved in a specific figure-8 pattern, timing her movements to match the humming frequency of the emitters, the system seemed to hesitate for just a moment before compensating. That hesitation was tiny, maybe half a second, but in that brief time, the gravitational field was not perfectly controlled. She rested in the center of the chamber, breathing hard and thinking. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was racing with possibilities. She had found the first crack in their perfect prison. The gravity cell was not just a weapon pointed at her. It was a complex system with sensors, processors, and feedback loops. And like any complex system, it could be hacked. Not with a computer or electronic tools. She did not have those. But with physics. With an understanding of how forces worked and how systems responded to unexpected inputs. So-Min looked up at the four glowing emitters in the corners. They hummed their steady rhythm, confident and powerful. But now she could see them differently. Not as weapons, but as components in a machine that she was about to reprogram. First moment, she whispered to herself. Understanding the physics, she had figured out how the gravity cell worked. Now she needed to find its weakness, and then she would turn their ultimate weapon into her tool of escape. So-Min had been in the gravity cell for hours now, and her body was approaching its limits. Even with her enhanced physical conditioning from years of high-gravity training, 25 times Earth normal was slowly crushing her. Her ribs ached. With each breath, and her heart worked so hard she could feel it pounding in her chest, but her mind was sharper than ever. She had mapped the gravitational fields and found the system's basic operating principles. Now she needed to find the weakness that would let her exploit it. Every system had one. Professor Han had taught her that. The more complex a system was, the more ways it could fail. The gravity cell was very complex. So Min forced herself to move again, this time focusing on the timing of the system's responses. She would make a sudden movement and count the milliseconds before the emitters adjusted. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. The delay was consistent, about 0.8 of a second from movement to full compensation. That delay existed for a reason. The system had to detect her movement, process the information, calculate the correct response, and then adjust all 4 emitters. Each step took time, even with advanced Vorthan computers, but there was something else she had noticed during her experiments. When she moved very quickly, the system sometimes overcompensated. If she darted toward one corner and immediately reversed direction, the emitters would adjust for her first movement just as she started her second movement. For a brief moment, the gravitational forces would be unbalanced. So Min decided to test this more systematically. She positioned herself near the center of the chamber and prepared for a series of rapid direction changes. Under normal gravity, this would be simple. Under 25 times normal, it would be like trying to sprint while carrying 5 other people on her back. She gathered her strength and lunged toward the front left corner. The movement was clumsy and slow, but it was fast enough to trigger the system's sensors. Just as she felt the emitters beginning to adjust, she reversed direction and threw herself toward the back right corner. The effect was immediate and dramatic. For almost a full second, the gravitational field went chaotic. The emitters, still adjusting for her first movement, were caught off guard by her reversal. The gravity in the front of the chamber dropped to maybe 15 times normal, while the back jumped to over 30 times. Somin felt like she was falling sideways as the unbalanced forces pulled her around. Then the system caught up and everything stabilized again. But in that 1 second of chaos, Somin had learned something crucial. The gravity cell's control system treated the chamber as a single zone with one target. It was not designed to handle rapid, contradictory movement data. She tried the experiment again, this time moving in a triangular pattern: front corner, back corner, side corner, back to center. Each movement as fast as she could manage under the crushing weight. Again, the system struggled to keep up. The gravitational fields oscillated wildly as the emitters tried to compensate for her unpredictable path. For several seconds, the cell was filled with shifting, unbalanced forces that pulled her in multiple directions. Interesting, she muttered, then immediately wished she had not spoken aloud. The Vorthans might still be listening, but her discovery was too important to ignore. The gravity cell's weakness was not in its hardware. The emitters themselves were probably very reliable. The weakness was in its software, in the control algorithms that decided how to respond to her movements. Those algorithms were designed for normal behavior. They expected prisoners to move slowly and predictably, trying to escape or hide or attack the emitters directly. They were not designed for someone who moved in rapid, chaotic patterns that created contradictory sensor data. So Min began to think like the engineer she had trained to be. How would she design a system like this? What assumptions would she make about how a prisoner would behave? First assumption: prisoners would try to minimize their exposure to high gravity. They would move slowly and carefully, conserving energy. Second assumption: prisoners would move toward exits or toward the emitters themselves, trying to escape or disable the system. Third assumption: prisoners would behave rationally, making logical choices about when and how to move. All of those assumptions were wrong when applied to her current situation. So Min was not trying to minimize her exposure to gravity. She was willing to endure enormous forces if it helped her understand the system. She was not moving toward exits or emitters. She was moving in seemingly random patterns. And she was definitely not behaving rationally by normal standards. She was behaving like a human. engineer who understood that sometimes you had to break the rules to solve an impossible problem. The control system was probably based on predictive algorithms. It tried to guess where she would move next so it could adjust the emitters in advance. But if her movements were truly random, the predictions would be wrong more often than right, and wrong predictions would lead to control errors. So Dashmin spent the next hour testing different movement patterns, pushing her body to its absolute limits. Quick darts in random directions, sudden stops and starts. Circular movements that changed radius unpredictably. Figure 8 patterns with irregular timing. Each experiment taught her more about the system's responses. She found that diagonal movements confused it more than straight-line movements. Rapid acceleration and deceleration caused bigger control errors than steady-speed motion. And movements that combined multiple direction changes in quick succession could cause the system to oscillate for several seconds before stabilizing. Most importantly, she discovered that the system had built-in safety limits when the control errors got too large. The emitters would briefly reduce their output to prevent damage to the equipment. During those brief moments, the total gravitational force in the chamber would drop significantly. That was the weakness she had been looking for. If she could create enough chaos in the control system, she could force it to activate its safety protocols. And during those safety shutdowns, she would have a window of opportunity, but she needed to be very careful about timing. The safety protocols only lasted a few seconds, and then the system would reset and resume normal operation. She would have one chance to act, and if she missed it, the Vorthans would probably realize what she was doing and modify their security procedures. So Dashmin lay in the center of the chamber, breathing hard and planning her next move. Her body was exhausted and her muscles were screaming in pain, but her mind was focused and determined. She had found the second piece of the puzzle. The gravity cell's control system could be confused and overloaded by sufficiently chaotic movement patterns. Now she needed to figure out how to use that knowledge to escape. The gravity emitters hummed above her, still confident and powerful, but So-Min could see past their facade now. They were not unbeatable weapons, they were just machines with sensors and software and built-in limitations, and machines could be hacked even without computers or tools. All you needed was an understanding of physics and the willingness to push a system beyond its design parameters. Second moment, she whispered, finding the weakness. Now she needed to figure out how to turn that weakness into a weapon. So-Min closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. Her body was at the edge of collapse, but her mind had never been clearer. She had understood the physics of the gravity cell and found its weakness. Now came the most dangerous part, using that knowledge to convert the cell from a prison into a weapon. The plan was simple in theory, but nearly impossible to execute. She needed to create such chaos in the gravity control system that it would overload and begin projecting uncontrolled gravitational fields throughout the ship. But the timing had to be perfect, and she would only get one chance. She thought about resonance again. Professor Han had once told the class about how ancient warriors could shatter castle walls by having hundreds of soldiers march in perfect step. The individual footsteps were small, but when they all hit at exactly the right rhythm, the cumulative effect could bring down massive structures. The gravity cell had 4 emitters working in coordination. If she could force them to fight against each other instead of working together, their combined power would become destructive rather than controlling. So Dashmin positioned herself in the exact center of the chamber and began to move. This was not the random chaos she had used to test the system. This was precise, calculated motion designed to exploit every weakness she had discovered. She started with a circular movement, timing each step to match the natural frequency of the emitter's humming. The system responded as expected, adjusting the gravitational fields to compensate for her movement. But So-Min was already changing direction, shifting to a figure 8 pattern that crossed through multiple interference zones. The emitters began to struggle. She could hear the humming sound becoming irregular as they tried to keep up with her movements. The gravitational fields started to fluctuate, creating momentary pockets of lighter and heavier gravity throughout the chamber. So Dashmin pushed harder. ignoring the pain in her muscles and the burning in her lungs. She shifted to a triangular pattern, then immediately to a spiral, then to rapid back-and-forth darts. Each movement was designed to create maximum confusion in the control system. The emitters were no longer humming in unison. Their sounds had become discordant, like an orchestra, where every musician was playing a different song. The gravitational field was oscillating wildly, sometimes crushing her to the floor and sometimes making her feel almost weightless, but this was still not enough. The system was stressed but not broken. So-min needed to push it beyond its safety limits. She remembered something from her training on Europa Base. The instructors had taught them about biofeedback loops, how the human body could learn to control normally automatic functions like heart rate and blood pressure through focused mental effort. What if she could turn herself into a living resonance generator? So-min began to move in a new pattern, one that used her entire body as a tool. She would tense and relax her muscles in specific rhythms, creating tiny changes in her mass distribution. She would hold her breath and then exhale sharply, changing her body's center of gravity. She would even control her heartbeat, speeding it up and slowing it down to create micro-vibrations in her blood flow. The effect was subtle at first, but the gravity sensors were incredibly sensitive. They detected every tiny change in her body's gravitational signature and tried to compensate. But the changes were happening too fast and in too many different ways. The humming from the emitters became a chaotic noise. The gravitational field was no longer stable. It was oscillating between 5 times normal gravity and 30 times normal, sometimes changing several times per second. So-min felt like she was being shaken apart, but she forced herself to continue. This was the critical moment. If she could push the system just a little bit further, the safety protocols would activate. She began to add voice to her movements, humming and singing in frequencies designed to interfere with the emitter's control signals. Her voice was weak under the crushing gravity, but it was enough to add another layer of chaos to an already overloaded system. The chamber began to shake. The metal walls were vibrating as gravitational forces pulled them in different directions. Somewhere in the distance, So-min could hear alarms beginning to sound throughout the Vorthen ship. Then it happened. One of the emitters lost synchronization with the others. Instead of working together to create a stable field, it began working against them. The gravitational forces in the chamber became completely chaotic, pulling in 4 different directions at once. The safety protocols activated. For 3 seconds, all 4 emitters shut down completely. So-min felt the crushing weight disappear as gravity in the chamber dropped to nearly zero. But she was ready for this moment. Instead of floating helplessly, she used the sudden freedom to launch herself toward one of the corners. When the emitters restarted, they found her in a completely different position than their sensors expected. The control system tried to recalibrate, but So-min was already moving again, using the brief moment of confusion to begin a new pattern of chaotic motion. This time, the effect was even more dramatic. The partially reset system was more vulnerable than before. Within seconds, 2 more emitters lost synchronization. The gravitational fields began to interfere destructively, creating zones of alternating high and low gravity throughout the chamber, but the chaos was no longer contained within the chamber. The gravity emitters were connected to the ship's main gravitational control network. As they lost synchronization, they began sending chaotic signals throughout the system. Emergency lights started flashing as artificial gravity fluctuated in other parts of the ship. So-min heard Thexvil's voice over the intercom, speaking rapidly in the Vorthen language. She caught fragments through her suit's translator: containment failure and cascade error and emergency shutdown. But it was too late for emergency shutdowns. The resonance effect had spread beyond the gravity cell into the ship's main systems. The elegant crystal corridors that looked so beautiful were now death traps as gravitational forces pulled randomly in every direction. The 4th emitter finally lost synchronization. For a moment, all 4 devices were working against each other, their gravitational fields interfering destructively. The chamber became a zone of pure chaos where gravity changed direction and intensity several times per second. Then the emitters began to overload. So Min felt the change immediately. Instead of precise, controlled gravitational fields, the devices were now producing raw gravitational energy. The chamber filled with forces that pulled and twisted in impossible directions. The metal walls began to buckle and bend as space-time itself warped around the overloaded emitters. She managed to reach the chamber's door controls just as the gravitational chaos reached its peak. The door was designed to withstand normal escape attempts, but it was not designed to handle the warped space-time effects of 4 overloaded gravity emitters. The metal buckled and split. Emergency systems throughout the ship screamed warnings as gravitational waves propagated through the crystalline structure. Somin could hear the sound of crystal breaking, a musical note that rose higher and higher until it was beyond human hearing. The door fell apart, and Somin tumbled out of the chamber into a corridor filled with chaotic gravity. She hit the wall, then the ceiling, then the floor as gravitational forces pulled her in random directions. But she was free. Behind her, the gravity cell had become something entirely new. No longer a prison, it was now a gravitational weapon that was tearing the Vorthan ship apart from the inside. The elegant crystalline corridors that had taken 50 years to grow were shattering like glass. The delicate technology that the Vorthans were so proud of was failing catastrophically as gravitational forces exceeded all design parameters. So Min smiled as she struggled to orient herself in the chaotic gravity field. The Vorthans had wanted to show her their ultimate weapon. Now she was going to show them what humans could do with it. Third moment, she said aloud, her voice carrying clearly through the chaos. Conversion complete. The Vorthan ship was dying around Somin, and it was dying beautifully. Crystal corridors that had taken decades to grow cracked and shattered as gravitational waves propagated through their delicate structure. The musical sound of breaking crystal filled the air, a symphony of destruction that grew louder with each passing second. So Min tumbled through the chaotic gravity field, trying to find something solid to grab onto. One moment she was pressed against the ceiling by forces that felt like 20 times normal gravity. The next moment she was floating freely as gravity reversed direction. Then she was slammed sideways into a wall as gravitational forces pulled her at impossible angles. But unlike the Vorthans, she could function in this chaos. Through a shattered crystal window, she caught glimpses of the ship's crew. The elegant beings who had seemed so graceful and powerful were now helpless. Their bodies, adapted to low gravity and delicate movements, could not handle the random gravitational forces. She saw them floating unconscious in the corridors, or pressed against walls by forces. Their fragile bones could not endure. The gravity cell behind her was the center of the chaos. The 4 overloaded emitters were producing gravitational energy that no longer followed any pattern or control. Waves of warped spacetime rippled outward from the chamber, carrying destruction to every part of the ship. So Min managed to grab onto a broken crystal support beam and pull herself toward what looked like a control station. The Vorthan technology was failing everywhere, but some systems were still partially functional. If she could access their computer network, she might be able to take control of the ship before it tore itself apart completely. The control station was a work of art. Curved crystal surfaces covered with symbols that glowed and shifted like living things. Under normal circumstances, it would have been impossible for a human to understand. But these were not normal circumstances. The gravitational chaos had damaged the station's security systems. Instead of requiring Vorthan biometric identification, the controls were stuck in emergency mode. Warning messages flashed in multiple languages, including Human Standard. Gravitational containment failure, the screen displayed. Cascade error in emitter network. Structural integrity compromised. Recommend immediate evacuation. Somin managed to access the ship's internal sensors despite the chaotic gravity that kept throwing her around. The damage was even worse than she had hoped. The gravitational waves from the overloaded cell were resonating through the ship's crystal structure, creating interference patterns that amplified the destruction. The Vorthons had built their ship like a musical instrument. Every crystal corridor and support beam was precisely tuned to create harmony. But harmony could become discord very quickly when the fundamental frequency was disrupted. She pulled up a display showing the ship's structural status. Red warnings covered almost every section. The elegant curves and spirals that made the ship beautiful were also making it fragile. Cracks spread through the crystal like lightning. Following the gravitational stress patterns through the ship's communication system, she could hear Thexville giving orders to his crew. His musical voice had become harsh and discordant, like, "His ship, seal sections 7 through 12, he commanded. "Evacuate the forward compartments. Get me a report on the human's location." Somin activated the communications panel and spoke directly to him. "I'm right here, Thexville." "How do you like your ultimate weapon now?" There was a moment of shocked silence. Then Thexville's voice came back, filled with rage. "What have you done? This is impossible. No species has ever escaped the gravity cell. No species has ever needed to," Somin replied, holding on to the control station as another gravitational wave threw her sideways. "Most civilized beings would have given up and answered your questions. But humans are not civilized beings, are we?" She accessed the ship's gravitational control network. The main systems were in chaos, but she could see the underlying structure. The Vorthons had connected everything: artificial gravity, structural support, even the propulsion system all ran through the same network. That had been their mistake. "You connected your gravity cell to the ship's main systems," Somin continued, working her way through the control menus. "Very efficient, very elegant. But when the cell overloaded, it took everything else with it." "Stop this immediately," Thexville demanded. "You are destroying a ship that took a century to build." "Good," Somin said. She found the controls for the ship's main gravity generators and began entering commands. "Maybe next time you will think twice before murdering human diplomats." With a few keystrokes, she reversed the polarity of the ship's artificial gravity system. Instead of creating stable gravitational fields, the generators began producing chaotic oscillations that interfered with the already unstable emissions from the gravity cell. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The ship's crystal structure, already stressed beyond its limits, began to resonate at its natural frequency. The sound was like a giant bell ringing, but the bell was breaking as it rang. Crystal supports shattered. Walls collapsed. The beautiful spiral corridors folded in on themselves like origami made of glass dots, so Min felt the ship shuddering around her as fundamental structural elements failed. She needed to find a way off this vessel before it completely destroyed itself. But first, she had other business to attend to. She accessed the ship's external communication array and began broadcasting on all human military frequencies. If Captain Kim Woo-jin was still alive out there, he needed to know what was happening. "This is Captain Lee So-min of the TDF Seoul," she transmitted. "I am aboard a Vorthon Empire vessel that is currently suffering catastrophic system failure. If any Terran Defense Force ships are in this sector, I could use immediate assistance." She also began downloading everything she could access from the ship's computer systems. Technical specifications, star charts, military plans, anything that might be useful to human intelligence services. The Vorthons had made another mistake. Their computer security was designed to prevent unauthorized access under normal conditions. But the gravitational chaos had damaged the security systems, and emergency protocols had opened access to systems that should have been protected. So-min smiled as she copied terabytes of classified Vorthon data to her suit's storage systems. The aliens had wanted information about human military capabilities. Instead, they had given her information about their own capabilities through the ship's internal cameras. She watched Thexville and his crew struggling to reach escape pods. The elegant beings who had moved like dancers now crawled through their broken ship like injured insects. Their delicate technology was failing them when they needed it most, but So-min was not without mercy. She accessed the ship's evacuation systems and began opening emergency airlocks throughout the vessel. The Vorthons could escape if they moved quickly enough. Some of them would survive to tell their empire about what had happened here, about how a single human had turned their ultimate weapon against them using nothing but physics and determination. The lesson would spread through the galaxy. Humans were not primitive brutes. They were something far more dangerous. They were engineers who could turn any system into a weapon if you gave them enough time to understand how it worked. A new gravitational wave, stronger than the others, shook the ship. This one came from deep within the vessel, where the main gravity generators were located. Somin realized that the cascade failure was spreading to systems she had not even touched. The ship was not just breaking apart anymore. It was collapsing into itself as gravitational forces pulled in every direction. Simultaneously, time to leave. Somin grabbed what data she could carry and began making her way toward the nearest escape pod. The corridors were a maze of broken, crystal and chaotic gravity, but she had spent her whole life learning how to navigate in difficult conditions. Behind her, the gravity cell continued its work of destruction. The weapon that was supposed to be unescapable had become something entirely new, a gravitational bomb that was tearing apart one of the most advanced ships in the galaxy. As she reached the escape pod bay, Somin allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. The Vorthons had underestimated humans completely. They thought physical strength was the only thing that mattered. They had learned better. Somin reached the escape pod bay just as another massive gravitational wave shook the dying ship. The bay was a circular chamber lined with crystal pods that looked more like works of art than emergency equipment. Half of them were already gone, launched by panicking Vorthon crew members who had fled when the ship began tearing itself apart. But Somin was not ready to leave yet. She had gained access to the ship's computer systems, but there was more she could do. The Vorthons had connected everything to their gravitational control network, including their communication arrays and navigation systems. If she worked quickly, she could turn their own ship into a transmitter for human forces, and she could make sure that no Vorthon ship would ever underestimate humans again. So Min found a functioning control panel near the pod bay and began working her way deeper into the ship's systems. The gravitational chaos was actually helping her. Security protocols that should have stopped her were malfunctioning. Leaving critical systems exposed, she accessed the ship's long-range communication array and began broadcasting a detailed technical analysis of everything she had learned. The physics of the gravity cell, the weaknesses in Vorthon technology, the resonance frequencies that could shatter their crystal ships, but most importantly, she transmitted the complete technical specifications of their gravity manipulation technology. "Attention all Terran Defense Force vessels," she broadcast. "This is Captain Lee So-min with priority intelligence data. The Vorthon Empire has developed artificial gravity technology far beyond our current capabilities, but it has critical vulnerabilities that can be exploited." As she transmitted the data, So-min continued working her way through the ship's systems. She found something interesting in the navigation computers, a complete database of Vorthon military positions throughout this sector of space. Additional intelligence follows, she continued her broadcast. Vorthon fleet positions, ship specifications, and tactical doctrines. This data was obtained from the flagship of Commander Deathworld during a hostile action against human diplomatic personnel. The ship shuddered again, and So-min realized that the gravitational collapse was accelerating. She needed to work faster. She accessed the ship's internal communication system and spoke directly to any Vorthons who might still be aboard. "This is Captain Lee So-min to all Vorthon personnel. Your ship is suffering cascade failure in all gravitational systems. I recommend immediate evacuation. You have approximately 10 minutes before structural collapse becomes irreversible." Through the ship's cameras, she could see Deathworld and a small group of his officers still trying to reach the command center. The elegant commander was no longer graceful. He crawled through broken corridors, his crystal skin cracked and bleeding a fluid that looked like liquid starlight. So Min opened a direct communication channel to him. "Deathworld, this is your prisoner. Are you enjoying your gravity cell now?" The Vorthan commander looked up at a camera, his multifaceted eyes burning with rage. You have destroyed a ship that took over a century to create. Thousands of artisans worked their entire lives to grow these crystals. And you used it to murder innocent diplomats? So-Min replied coldly. I told you that humans solve problems with engineering. You should have listened. This changes nothing, Vixville said. Though his musical voice was strained with pain and effort, the Empire has hundreds of ships. Your people will still fall to our superior technology. So-Min smiled and accessed another system, the ship's manufacturing database. The Vorthans had complete technical specifications for all their equipment, stored in the ship's computers. With a few commands, she began copying everything. Superior technology? She said, your gravity emitters use quantum resonance amplifiers with crystalline focusing matrices. Very elegant, but they have a natural resonance frequency of 847.3 Hz. Hit them with that frequency, and they destabilize completely. She could see Vexville's expression change as he realized what she was saying. Your crystal hulls are grown, using bioharmonic processes that align the molecular structure along specific stress patterns, So-Min continued. Beautiful work, but it means the entire ship resonates at predictable frequencies. 1,247 Hz will cause hairline fractures. 2,891 Hz will cause complete structural failure. Stop, Vexville whispered. Your artificial gravity system uses a centralized control network because your species prefers harmony and cooperation, So-Min went on relentlessly. But that means one overloaded emitter can bring down the entire system. A simple feedback loop can turn your most advanced ships into death traps. She transmitted all of this technical data along with her broadcast to human forces. Every weakness she had discovered, every vulnerability she had exploited, every resonance frequency, that could shatter Vorthan technology. This is what humans do, she told Vexville. We analyze. We learn, we adapt. And then we share that knowledge with everyone who needs it. Your empire wanted to fight us because you thought we were primitive brutes. But we are engineers, Vexville. We turn problems into solutions and weapons into tools. The ship's structure gave another massive shudder. Through the cameras, So-Min could see entire sections collapsing as the gravitational forces finally overwhelmed the crystal supports, but she was not finished yet. She accessed the ship's automated systems and began reprogramming them. Instead of trying to contain the gravitational chaos, she instructed the computers to amplify it. The ship would become a beacon, a demonstration of what happened when someone tried to imprison a human engineer. I am uploading a complete technical analysis of this incident to all human databases, she told Vexville. Every ship captain, every engineer, every scientist in human space will know exactly how your gravity cell works and how to turn it into a weapon. Your ultimate prison will become our blueprint for victory. She also programmed the ship's distress beacon to broadcast continuously on all frequencies, both human and Vorthan. The message was simple. This vessel was destroyed by a human prisoner, who converted their gravity cell into a gravitational weapon. All species should take note of human engineering capabilities. Through the communication array, So-Min finally heard the voice she had been hoping for. Captain So-Min, this is Captain Kim Woo-Jin aboard the TDF Incheon. We are reading your transmission and moving to intercept. Please respond if you are able. Relief flooded through her. Woo-Jin was alive, and human forces were in the area. Vexville had been lying about destroying the backup ship. Woo-Jin, this is So-Min. I am aboard a Vorthan vessel that is currently suffering complete structural failure due to gravitational system overload. I need immediate pickup, and I have priority intelligence data for Fleet Command. Understood. We are tracking multiple escape pods launching from the vessel. Are you in one of them? So-Min looked around the pod bay. Most of the escape pods were gone, but a few remained. She could launch now and be safely away before the ship's final collapse. But there was one more thing she wanted to do. She accessed the gravity cell's control systems one final time. The chamber was completely destroyed, its emitters overloaded, beyond repair. But the gravitational chaos it had created was still spreading through the ship's systems. With a few careful adjustments, Somin programmed the chaos to continue even after the ship's destruction. The gravitational waves would propagate outward at light speed, carrying the resonance frequencies that could disrupt Vorthan technology. Any Vorthan ship that came to investigate would find itself facing the same gravitational instabilities that had destroyed this vessel. "This is my gift to your empire, Thexville," she said as she finally moved toward an escape pod. "Every time you try to use gravity weapons against humans, remember what happened here. Remember that we turned your ultimate prison into our ultimate weapon." She sealed herself into the crystal escape pod and launched just as the ship's main structure began its final collapse. Through the pod's transparent walls, she watched the elegant vessel fold in on itself like a flower closing its petals. But she had given it a new purpose. Instead of being a tool of oppression, it would become a lesson that spread throughout the galaxy. Humans were not primitive brutes. They were something far more dangerous than that. They were problem solvers. Captain Kim Woo-jin stood on the bridge of the TDF Incheon, watching the rescue operation through the main view screen. His friend Somin's escape pod was safely aboard, along with 7 Vorthan survivors who had managed to escape their dying ship. Behind them, the wreckage of the Vorthan vessel continued to collapse in on itself, creating gravitational distortions that registered on sensors from thousands of kilometers away. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Choi Min-ae from the sensor. "Station. The gravitational waves from the wreck are still propagating. Whatever happened over there, it is affecting space-time itself." Woo-jin nodded grimly. He had received Somin's technical transmissions and was still trying to process what she had accomplished. A single human prisoner had not only escaped from what the Vorthans considered an unbreakable cell, she had turned their own ultimate weapon against them and destroyed their most advanced warship. The medical bay doors opened, and Somin walked onto the bridge. She moved carefully, her body still recovering from hours under extreme gravity, but her eyes were sharp and focused. Behind her came Dr. Park Sang-ho, who had been treating her injuries. "She has severe muscle strain and possible stress fractures in several bones," the doctor reported quietly to Woo-jin. "But she refused to stay in medical, said she had work to do." "Thank you, doctor," Woo-jin said. He looked at his friend with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Somin, are you sure you should be up?" "I am fine," Somin replied, though her voice was hoarse from her ordeal. "But we need to talk. All of us," she gestured toward the view screen, where the Vorthan survivors could be seen in the ship's detention bay. They huddled together in the low-gravity environment that had been set up for their comfort, their crystal skin dim and fractured. "Have they said anything?" Somin asked. "Commander Thexville has requested to speak with you," Woo-jin replied. "He claims he has important information to share." Somin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I bet he does. Let me guess, he wants to negotiate, among other things. He also wants to understand how you escaped their gravity cell." "Apparently. That technology has never failed before." "It did not fail," Somin said. "I made it succeed, just not in the way they intended." She moved to the communication station and opened a channel to the detention bay. Thexville's image appeared on the screen. The elegant Vorthan commander looked broken. His crystal skin was cracked in multiple places, and his multifaceted eyes had lost their earlier arrogance. "Captain Lee So-min," he said, his musical voice subdued. "I must speak with you." "Then speak," So-min replied coldly. "What you did should have been impossible. Our gravity cells have contained members of every known species. The technology is flawless." "The technology is fine," So-min said. "Your understanding of physics is what was flawed. You built a system that assumed your prisoners would behave rationally and predictably. But humans do not always behave rationally." Thexville was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You destroyed a ship that represented centuries of our finest work. Thousands of artisans devoted their lives to growing those crystals. And you used that beautiful ship to murder diplomats and torture prisoners," So-min replied without sympathy. "Beauty does not excuse evil, Thexville." "You do not understand," the Vorthan commander continued. "The Empire will not let this stand. They will send more ships, better ships. They will study what you did and find ways to prevent it. So-min exchanged glances with Wu-jin, then smiled. Let them try. I have already transmitted complete technical specifications of your gravity technology to every human ship in this sector. By now, the information is spreading throughout human space. Every engineer, every scientist, every ship captain will know exactly how your systems work and how to exploit their weaknesses. Vexvol's expression changed to something that might have been fear. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. So-min said, your people made a fundamental error. You assumed that humans would be impressed by your technology and intimidated by your power. Instead, you gave us a puzzle to solve. And humans are very good at solving puzzles. She activated another display, showing the technical data she had transmitted. Resonance frequencies, structural weaknesses, control system vulnerabilities, everything she had learned during her imprisonment. This is what humans do when someone threatens us, she continued. We analyze the threat. We understand how it works, we find its weaknesses. And then we share that knowledge with everyone who needs it. On the screen, Vexvol seemed to shrink into himself. The Empire will not forgive this humiliation. The Empire will learn to respect human capabilities, Wu-jin interjected, stepping forward. Or they will suffer the same fate as your ship. So-min accessed the ship's communication system and opened a channel to Vorthan command frequencies. This is Captain Lee So-min of the Terran Defense Corps, broadcasting to all Vorthan Empire vessels. Your commander Vexvol attempted to use your gravity cell technology to torture information from a human prisoner. Instead, he provided me with complete technical specifications of your most advanced systems. She transmitted a compressed data package containing everything she had learned. These specifications are now being distributed throughout human space. Any future attempts to use gravity weapons against human forces will be met with appropriate countermeasures. The bridge was silent for a moment as the implications sank in. Then Lieutenant Choi spoke up from her station. Captain, we are receiving multiple responses to the transmission. Vorthan ships throughout the sector are requesting emergency consultations. With their command structure? Good, So-min said. Let them panic for a while. Maybe they will learn something. She turned back to Vexvol's image on the screen. You wanted to know about human military capabilities. Here is what you should have learned. We do not just survive in harsh conditions, we weaponize them. We do not just endure your torture devices, we reprogram them. And we do not just escape from your prisons. We turn them into tools for our own purposes. Vexvol was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want from us? Nothing, So-min replied. You have already given me everything I needed. Technical specifications, strategic intelligence, and a demonstration of how easily your most advanced systems can be turned against you. She paused, then added, but I will give you some free advice. The next time your empire considers attacking human ships, remember what happened here. Remember that you locked one human in your ultimate prison, and she turned it into a weapon that destroyed your most advanced warship. And remember, Wu-jin added, that there are millions more humans where she came from, all of them engineers, all of them problem solvers, all of them capable of doing exactly what she did. So-min closed the communication channel and turned to face her friend. The exhaustion was finally showing on her face, but her eyes were still bright with satisfaction. How long until we reach Fleet Command? She asked. 18 hours, Wu-jin replied. The medical staff wants you to rest. I will rest when we get home, So-min said. Right now, I need to write a complete report on Vorthan gravity technology. Every detail, every weakness, every possible countermeasure. She moved toward the bridge exit, then paused and looked back at the view screen. The wreckage of the Vorthan ship was still visible, still collapsing under the chaotic gravitational forces she had unleashed. They called it an ultimate weapon, she said quietly. But there is no such thing as an ultimate weapon. There are only tools that can be turned to different purposes. As she left the bridge, Wu-jin could hear her muttering to herself about resonance frequencies and feedback loops. Even after everything she had been through, Her engineer's mind was still working, still analyzing, still looking for ways to turn problems into solutions. Behind them, the Vorthan Empire's most advanced warship continued its collapse into twisted metal and broken crystal. But its destruction had created something far more valuable than the ship itself. It had created knowledge. And in human hands, knowledge was the most dangerous weapon of all. The word would spread throughout the galaxy. Humans were not primitive brutes to be easily conquered. They were engineers who could turn any system into a weapon, any prison into a tool, and any problem into an opportunity. The Vorthan Empire would learn this lesson well. And so would every other species that thought humans could be easily intimidated or controlled. They had locked the human in a gravity cell. She had turned it into a weapon in 3 moments, and now the entire galaxy would know exactly how she had done it.